The night was cold and rain poured without mercy. The wind howled against the old wooden house at the edge of the colony. Inside, the human named Daniel sat near a small fire, trying to stay warm. He lived alone, and silence was his only companion. But then there was a knock, a heavy, angry knock on his door. Daniel frowned, stood up, and pulled the door open. What he saw froze him in shock. A tall alien man stood outside, his eyes full of disgust. He held the arm of a woman, dragging her like unwanted trash. Her skin shimmered with strange silver lines, her eyes deep violet. She looked weak, wet, and broken. The alien man shoved her forward, and she fell hard at Daniel's feet. "You can keep her, human," the alien spat, his voice filled with hate. "She is a dirty heritage, a shame to my house, a shame to my blood." Daniel stepped back, his mind racing. The woman tried to rise, but she was too weak. Her hands trembled as she whispered something Daniel could not understand. Her voice was soft, like the cry of someone who had lost everything. Daniel looked up at the alien man, confused. "What do you mean, leave her here? She's your wife, isn't she?" The alien man sneered. "Not anymore. She is no wife of mine, no pure blood, no honor." His eyes flashed with rage. "She is nothing but filth." With those words, he turned and walked away into the storm. His shadow vanished into the dark night. The sound of his steps disappeared, leaving only the storm and the silence behind. Daniel stood at the door, frozen. He looked down at the woman lying on his doorstep. Her clothes were torn, her hair stuck to her pale face from the rain. Her chest rose and fell with painful breaths. For a moment, Daniel thought about closing the door. This was not his problem, this was not his fight. But then he saw her eyes, half open, staring at him with a silent plea. Eyes that carried both fear and hope. Eyes that begged him not to leave her to die in the cold. Daniel cursed under his breath. "Damn it," he muttered, and bent down to lift her. She was lighter than he expected, fragile like a bird with broken wings. He carried her inside and placed her near the fire. The warmth touched her face and she let out a small sigh. Daniel quickly brought a blanket and wrapped it around her shivering body. He poured a cup of warm water and gently pressed it to her lips. She drank slowly, weak but alive. For the first time, Daniel saw her face clearly in the firelight. She was beautiful in a way he had never seen. Not human beauty, but something strange, alien, yet full of grace. But her beauty was marked with sorrow. Her violet eyes carried endless pain. "Why did he call you dirty?" Daniel asked softly. She didn't answer, only looked down. Her lips trembled and a tear rolled down her cheek. It was clear she was hiding something deep, something heavy. Daniel leaned back, watching her in silence. The storm raged outside, but inside the fire cracked softly. The house felt smaller, tighter with the weight of secrets. He didn't know why her husband abandoned her. He didn't know what dirty heritage meant, but he knew one thing. This woman had been betrayed, thrown away like trash, and now she was in his care. Daniel sighed again. "Looks like you're stuck with me tonight," he said, half to himself. The woman looked at him, her eyes shining in the dim light. For the first time, a flicker of relief crossed her face. But Daniel did not notice the shadow outside his window. Far away in the storm, unseen eyes were watching. The betrayal at his doorstep was only the beginning. Something darker was coming, and Daniel had no idea what he had just invited into his life. The storm had ended by morning, but the silence in Daniel's small house felt heavier than the night before. The alien woman lay on his couch, her body wrapped in a blanket, her eyes half closed. She had slept for the first time without shaking, without crying, but her face was still pale. Her beauty carried sorrow, like someone who had lost her world. Daniel stood near the window, watching the colony lights flicker in the distance. He could not forget the words of her husband. Dirty heritage. The insult had burned in his ears all night. But what did it mean? When the woman finally stirred, Daniel turned to her. Her violet eyes opened slowly and she whispered with a soft voice, "Where am I?" Daniel knelt beside her. Safe, for now. You're in my home. She looked around, confused, like a bird trapped in a strange cage. Her hands clutched the blanket tightly as she whispered again, Why did you help me?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because leaving you out there would be the same as killing you, and I'm not like him." Her lips trembled, and for the first time she gave a small nod. He asked her name, but she lowered her head and whispered, "Lyra." The sound of it was soft, almost broken. Daniel repeated it, "Lyra." As if fixing it in his memory, Lyra tried to sit up, but her body was still weak. Daniel brought her some bread and warm soup he had managed to prepare. At first she hesitated, but hunger won. She ate slowly, carefully, as if she was afraid even food could betray her. Daniel watched silently, noticing every small shake of her hands. After a while, he asked again, "Why did he call you dirty heritage? Why would a man throw away his own wife in the storm?" Lyra froze, her spoon still in her hand. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry out loud. Instead, her voice broke into pieces. "Because I was never his wife in truth. I was only his shame." Daniel leaned closer. "Shame? What do you mean?" Her hands trembled harder. "My blood is not pure. My mother was not of his kind. They call me a half-breed, unworthy." Her voice shook like glass about to break. "I was given to him as a bride, not because he loved me, but because my family was desperate to protect me, desperate to hide me." Daniel felt anger rise inside him. "So he married you just to humiliate you?" Lyra nodded weakly. "Yes. And when his power grew, he no longer needed me. I became dirt in his eyes." Her lips quivered as she whispered, "He called me his broken bride, a scar on his honor." The room was quiet. Only the crackle of fire filled the space. Daniel clenched his fists. He could not understand how anyone could treat her this way. She had done nothing but exist, and yet she had been punished for it. Lyra looked at him suddenly, her violet eyes searching. "You don't understand. Humans don't live under blood laws." She took a deep breath and whispered, "In my world, heritage is everything. Without pure blood, you are less than nothing." Her voice dropped lower, almost a whisper to herself. "And I was the proof of weakness, a mistake that could not be erased." Daniel leaned back, staring at her. He wanted to say something comforting, but words felt empty. Instead, he said simply, "You are not a mistake to me." Her eyes widened a little, like she did not expect such words. A tear finally escaped, rolling down her cheek. For a long time, she had carried her pain in silence, but now in this small human house with this strange man, she felt a tiny spark of safety. Yet safety was fragile. Outside in the shadows, footsteps moved quietly. Two figures whispered to each other, scanning Daniel's home. They were searching, hunting. Her husband had not finished with her. Inside, Lyra shivered suddenly, as if she sensed it. Daniel noticed and pulled the blanket tighter around her. "You're safe here," he repeated. But the way the storm had ended too quickly, and the silence outside seemed too deep, it gave him unease. That night, as Daniel prepared a small space for her to sleep near his own room, Lyra stopped him, her voice weak but urgent. "Please, don't leave me alone." Her eyes carried fear so deep that Daniel could not refuse. He nodded, moving her bedroll closer to his. The firelight flickered across the walls, two shadows side by side. Lyra closed her eyes at last, whispering softly. In her alien tongue, Daniel could not understand the words, but he caught one name, repeated again and again. It sounded like the name of a child. His chest tightened. What secret was she hiding still? As he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Daniel knew one thing for certain. This was not just about a broken bride. It was about something bigger, darker, and he was already part of it, whether he liked it or not. The night was quiet, too quiet. The storm had passed, but the silence outside Daniel's house felt heavy. The stars above were hidden by dark clouds, and the colony lights in the distance flickered weakly. Inside, the fire burned low, throwing. Long shadows across the small wooden walls. Daniel lay on his bedroll, eyes half closed. He could not sleep. His thoughts kept circling back to the alien woman lying only a few feet away. Her name echoed in his mind. Lyra, the broken bride, abandoned like trash. Her story had carved itself into his heart, but he knew she had not told him everything. She shifted in her blanket, her breathing uneven. At first, Daniel thought she was simply dreaming, but then he heard it, soft words in a language he did not know. Her lips moved as if whispering secrets into the air. Daniel raised himself on his elbow, listening carefully. The words sounded musical yet heavy with sorrow. Her voice cracked as if she was weeping in her sleep. And then, he caught a name. Repeated again and again, broken by sobs, a name he did not recognize. But the way she whispered it, like a mother calling out to her child, sent chills down his spine. Daniel's chest tightened. So that was the secret she had not told him. She had lost someone, perhaps a child. The pain in her voice was so raw, so sharp, it felt like knives cutting through the silence. Lyra, Daniel whispered gently. But she did not wake. Her whispers grew louder and tears rolled down her cheeks even in sleep. The firelight caught the wet trails on her pale skin. She looked fragile, broken in ways he could not understand. Daniel sat up fully, fighting the urge to shake her awake. Instead, he moved closer, his voice calm. You're safe here. No one will hurt you. For a moment, her body stilled and the whispers softened. But then she turned suddenly, clutching his sleeve with desperate fingers. Her violet eyes snapped open, wide and full of fear. She gasped as if dragged back from a nightmare. Her chest rose and fell fast. Daniel steadied her, speaking softly. It's all right. It was just a dream. But she shook her head quickly. No, not a dream. Her voice trembled. Daniel frowned. Then what was it? She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Finally, she whispered, a memory. Her voice was so low he almost missed it. Daniel waited, but she said nothing more. The silence stretched, and finally he asked, the name you were saying, who is it? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her whole body seemed to shrink as if the weight of her secret was too heavy to carry. It doesn't matter, she said quickly. It is gone. Everything is gone. Daniel leaned closer, his tone gentle, but firm. It matters to you, and if you're staying here, it matters to me. Her violet eyes finally met his, filled with fear, sorrow, and something else. Guilt, she whispered. His name was Cale. My son. The words fell into the room like stones. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his chest. A son. She had a child. The realization made everything sharper. The betrayal, the abandonment, the whispers. What happened to him? Daniel asked softly. Her eyes filled again, her hands clutching the blanket tightly. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak. But before she could answer, a sound outside the window made Daniel stiffen. It was faint, like footsteps in wet soil. Someone was out there. Lyra froze too, her eyes wide. She whispered quickly in her alien tongue, then clamped her hand over her mouth. Daniel stood up quietly, moving toward the door. The night outside was still dark, but he could feel it. Eyes watching, waiting. He grabbed the small hunting knife he kept near the door, but when he opened it, the yard was empty. Only the sound of wind brushing through the trees. He closed the door slowly, locking it. When he turned back, Lyra was sitting upright, her face pale. They are looking for me, she whispered. Her voice shook with terror. He will not let me go so easily. Daniel moved back to her side. Then, we'll deal with it when the time comes, he said firmly. But inside he felt the weight of her words. This was no simple abandonment, this was a hunt, and he had unknowingly placed himself in the middle of it. Lyra lowered her head again, whispering, You don't understand. If they find me, they won't just take me, they'll kill anyone who protects me. Her voice broke as she clutched her blanket tighter. I should not be here. I should not have survived. Daniel crouched down to meet her eyes. Listen to me, Lyra, he said, his voice steady. You are not dirt. You are not a mistake. and you don't deserve to die in the cold." Her eyes widened, trembling with emotion. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. For a long moment, she simply stared at him. And then, with a soft sob, she leaned against his shoulder, her body shaking as silent tears fell. Daniel placed a careful arm around her. He did not fully understand her pain or the secrets she carried, but he knew one thing. He could not abandon her, not now, not ever. Outside, in the dark, unseen figures moved again. The hunters were closer. The whispers in the night were not only Lyra's, they belonged to her enemies too, and soon Daniel's quiet life would be torn apart. The next morning, the air felt strange. Daniel stepped outside to fetch water, but the quiet around his home made his skin crawl. The birds that usually sang near the trees were silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He filled the bucket, but his eyes kept moving across the edge of the woods. Something was wrong. He could feel it, like unseen eyes pressing against his back. Inside, Lyra sat near the fire, holding the blanket tightly around her shoulders. Her violet eyes watched him through the small window. She looked calmer, but Daniel knew it was only on the surface. Her hands still trembled whenever a sound echoed from outside. When he entered, he tried to smile. "Looks like you're feeling a little better," he said. But she shook her head. "No. They are close, I can feel them." Her words sent a chill down his spine. Daniel wanted to argue, but then a faint crack of a branch snapped outside. Both of them froze. Daniel moved to the door quietly, knife in hand. Through the small gap, he saw shadows moving between the trees. Not animals, figures tall and armed. Lyra's voice shook. "They've come for me." Her breath quickened. "He sent his hunters," Daniel cursed under his breath. "How many?" Her eyes closed for a moment, as if listening to the air. "At least 3, maybe more." Daniel's heart pounded. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained to fight alien hunters. But he knew one thing. He would not hand her over. Not after everything she had survived. The first knock came suddenly, sharp against the wooden door. "Human!" a voice growled, deep and harsh. "Open the door. You shelter what does not belong to you." Lyra grabbed Daniel's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Don't open it," she whispered desperately. Her eyes wide with terror, Daniel nodded slowly, his voice low. "Stay behind me." Another voice came from outside, louder, angrier. "She is marked filth. She belongs to the Baron no longer. She is ours to take her to burn." The words made Daniel's blood boil. He stepped closer to the door, his knife tight in his hand. "You'll get nothing here," he shouted back. "This is my home and she stays." The hunters laughed cruelly, the sound echoing through the trees. One voice hissed, "Then you will die with her, human." The next moment, the door shook violently. "They were trying to break it," Lyra cried out softly, pressing herself against the wall. Daniel's muscles tensed. He had only seconds. He dragged a heavy chair against the door, then another. The wood groaned under each slam from outside. Daniel turned to Lyra, his eyes fierce. "If they get through, run to the back, don't stop." But she shook her head violently, tears filling her eyes. "No. If they catch me alone, I won't survive. Please, don't leave me." The door cracked, splinters flying into the air. Daniel raised his knife, his heartbeat loud in his ears. One more slam and the wood burst open. 2 tall hunters stepped inside, their armor dark, their faces cruel. They carried long blades that shimmered under the dim firelight. Their eyes locked on Lyra immediately. "There she is," one hissed. "The half-breed filth." Daniel moved in front of her, knife raised. "You'll touch her only if you kill me first." The hunters sneered. "A human dares to stand between us and our law? Fool." They lunged forward, their blades flashing. Daniel dodged the first strike, his knife slashing across the hunter's arm. The alien snarled, stumbling back as dark blood spilled. The second hunter swung at him, forcing Daniel to retreat. Across the room, the clash of metal against wood filled the small house. Lyra gasped, covering her mouth. Her heart screamed to help, but fear chained her to the spot. Daniel fought like a cornered animal, every move desperate, Every strike meant to survive just one more second. He managed to kick a chair into the second hunter, knocking him sideways. Then he slashed upward. Cutting across the first one's chest, the alien roared in pain, staggering. But the second hunter recovered quickly, raising his blade for a killing blow. At that moment, Lyra screamed, "Daniel!" Her cry made the hunter hesitate. Turning his head just enough, Daniel lunged, driving his knife into the alien's side. The hunter collapsed with a guttural sound. The other staggered toward the door, bleeding. "You will regret this, human," he growled before stumbling into the night. The room was filled with the smell of blood and smoke. Daniel stood trembling, knife dripping, his chest heaving with every breath. Lyra ran to him, her eyes wide with shock and fear. You fought them," she whispered. Daniel gave a bitter laugh. "I didn't have much choice." But inside, he knew this was only the beginning. If these were just hunters, more would come, stronger. And soon the Baron himself would know that his abandoned wife was alive. Lyra touched Daniel's hand, her voice shaking. "No one has ever fought for me before." Her words were soft. Almost unbelieving, Daniel looked at her, seeing the pain and gratitude mixed in her violet eyes. He realized then that protecting her had become more than just survival. It was now his choice, his stand. Outside, the shadows shifted again. More. Hunters moved silently, watching. The battle was not over. It had only just begun. The house was silent again, but not peaceful. The broken door leaned against the frame. Blood stained the floorboards. Daniel sat near the fire, cleaning the edge of his knife with shaking hands. Every muscle in his body ached, and his mind still replayed the fight. Across the room, Lyra sat quietly, wrapped in the same blanket. Her violet eyes were wide, her face pale. She had watched Daniel fight like a man who should have died but refused to fall. Her heart still raced with fear, but also something else, something she had never felt before. He glanced at her, exhaustion clear in his eyes. "You should rest," he said softly. "You need it more than I do." But Lyra shook her head. "I cannot sleep. Not alone, not after this." Her words hung in the air. Daniel blinked, unsure if he had heard right. "You mean—" She lowered her gaze, clutching the blanket tighter. "When I sleep, the memories come back. The hunters, the Baron, the loss." Her voice trembled. "If I am alone, I feel like I am drowning." Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen her fear, heard her cries in the night. He knew she wasn't exaggerating. Still, sharing the same bed was no small thing. "I don't want to bring you shame," she whispered quickly. Her words rushed. "In my world, even lying beside a man can be judged. But I have nothing left to lose, and right now, I only want to feel safe." Daniel studied her carefully. There was no hidden trick in her voice, no manipulation, only raw fear and a plea for comfort. He sighed, setting the knife aside. "All right," he said gently. "But it's not about shame here. You'll have the bed and I'll take the floor beside it." Lyra looked at him, surprised. You would give up your bed for me?" Daniel shrugged. "It's just wood and cloth. You need it more than I do." For the first time, a small smile touched her lips, faint but real. She moved slowly, lying down on the bed, her body still tense. Daniel spread his blanket on the floor. Stretching out within arm's reach, the firelight flickered, casting warm shadows across the room. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the soft crackle of the fire and the distant howl of night wind filled the silence. Then, in a trembling voice, Lyra whispered, "Why do you risk yourself for me? You could have let them take me. You could have let me die, but you didn't." Daniel turned his head toward her, his eyes steady. "Because no one deserves to be treated like that. Not you. Not anyone." She bit her lip, tears shining in, her violet eyes. "No one has ever said that to me before." Her words pierced him deeper than any blade. He realized then how truly alone she had been her whole life. Not just abandoned now, but unloved even before. Slowly, she reached out across the small distance between them. Her fingers trembled as they brushed his hand on the floor. Daniel froze, but he didn't pull away. Her touch was fragile, like a child reaching for light in the dark. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Even if this ends tomorrow, thank you for tonight, for letting me feel human." Daniel tightened his hand gently around hers. "You are more human than most humans I've met," he said quietly. Her eyes widened, and then, for the first time, she let out a soft laugh. It was small, but it carried warmth. Like a spark in the cold, they lay like that, hand in hand, until her breathing slowed. Daniel listened, realizing she had fallen asleep at last. Her face in the firelight looked softer, peaceful, almost free. He whispered to himself, "Rest while you can. I'll keep watch." But even as he said it, his eyes grew heavy. Exhaustion pulled at him. And without realizing it, he drifted into sleep beside her bed, still holding her hand. The night passed quietly, but danger never slept. In the woods, more hunters gathered, their voices low and sharp. The wounded one from earlier told them what had happened. "The human fights like a madman," he growled. "He protects her as if she is his own." The leader's eyes glowed in the darkness. "Then we will burn them both," he hissed. "Let the human taste the same shame she carries." Back inside, Lyra stirred briefly, her dreams still haunted by the memory of her lost son. But this time the warmth of Daniel's hand anchored her. For the first time in years, she did not wake screaming. When morning came, Daniel blinked awake to find Lyra watching him. Her hand was still in his, her eyes softer than before. "You kept me safe," she whispered. Daniel gave a tired smile. That was the deal, wasn't it? But deep inside, both of them knew the truth. This was no longer just survival. Something unspoken had begun between them. Something fragile, but powerful. And in a world that had cast her aside, Lyra had finally found a place where she wasn't alone. Yet outside, the shadows of the hunters still lingered, and the bed they now shared might soon become a battlefield. The morning sun filtered weakly through the cracks in the wooden walls. Daniel sat at the table, sharpening his knife, his eyes heavy from little sleep. Lyra moved quietly around the room, folding the blanket, her violet eyes distant. For the first time, the house felt less like a shelter and more like a waiting cage. Daniel finally spoke, his voice steady. "They'll be back. We both know it." Lyra froze, her hands tightening on the blanket. "Yes," she whispered. "They won't stop until I'm gone." He leaned forward, watching her. "Why, Lyra? Why do they hate you so much? What does dirty heritage truly mean?" Her body stiffened as if his words had pierced her. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then she lowered herself onto the chair opposite him, her face pale, her lips trembling. "My blood," she began slowly, "is not like theirs." Her voice was soft but heavy with pain. "My mother was one of them, proud, pure, part of the Baron's own people." Her violet eyes glistened. "But my father, he was not." Daniel frowned, leaning closer. "Not one of them? Then what was he?" Lyra's hands gripped each other so tightly her knuckles turned white. "They called him an outsider, a shadow from beyond the stars, someone forbidden." Her voice cracked. "My mother loved him, but in their world, love does not matter, only bloodlines do." She lowered her gaze, shame written across her face, and when I was born I was proof of her betrayal. A child with mixed blood, half of one world, half of another, and accepted by neither. Daniel's chest tightened. He could see how much it hurt her to speak, but he also saw the truth. Her eyes, her strange silver-lined skin, the way her presence was both alien and unique. She was not broken. She was something more. "So that's why the Baron cast you out," Daniel said quietly. Lyra nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes, I was given to him as a bride to hide the shame, to bury me in his house where I could never be seen." Her voice shook. "But he never wanted me. To him, I was filth that poisoned his honor." He called me dirty heritage, and he waited for the day he could throw me away. Daniel clenched his fists on the table. His voice grew hard. No, one chooses their blood, Lyra. What they did to you, what he did, it's cruel. It's not your shame, it's theirs. Her eyes widened at his words. For so long she had carried the weight of guilt, believing herself a mistake. Now here was a man who looked at her not as filth, but as someone worthy of care, but her voice still trembled with doubt. You don't understand, in my world mixed blood is cursed. They believe it brings weakness, misfortune, even death. If the Baron admits I lived under his roof, his rivals would use it to destroy him. Daniel leaned forward, his gaze unshaken. Then let them. You're not cursed, Lyra. You're alive. You're stronger than they want to believe. She looked at him, violet eyes shimmering with tears. Stronger? Daniel, I am broken. I lost everything. Even my son. Cale was taken from me because of who I am. Her voice cracked as she pressed her hands over her face. They said he was too weak to live, that his blood was poison like mine. They took him from me before I could even hold him long enough. They said he was gone. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Daniel's chest ached at her words. He reached across the table and gently took her hands, pulling them away from her face. Listen to me, he said firmly. What they told, you may not be the truth. Maybe Cale was taken, but maybe he's still out there. And even if he's not, you are not broken. You are not filth. You are not cursed. You are Lyra. Her lips parted in shock, her tears slowing. No one had ever spoken her name like that. As if it was something precious. For a moment she almost believed him, but then there was a sound outside. Heavy footsteps, louder this time. Daniel turned sharply toward the door, his knife already in hand. Lyra's eyes widened in terror. They've come back, she whispered, her voice trembling. A deep voice called from outside, filled with hatred. Human, hand over the half-breed, or we burn your home and your flesh with it. Daniel moved to the door, his jaw set. Behind him, Lyra stood, her body shaking but her eyes beginning to glow faintly with a strange silver light. Her heritage, the thing they hated, stirred within her. She whispered under her breath, almost in disbelief. My father's blood. It's waking. Daniel turned to her, startled by the glow in her eyes. What's happening? He asked quickly. Lyra's voice shook, but there was a strength rising in her tone. They fear my blood because they do not understand it. And maybe I never did either. The pounding on the door grew louder. The hunters were ready to burn the house down, but this time, Daniel wasn't alone. Beside him stood Lyra, no longer just the broken bride. Her secret heritage had been revealed, and now it might be the only thing that could save them both. The pounding at the door shook the whole house. Daniel tightened his grip on the knife, his jaw set. But this time, he wasn't standing alone. Beside him, Lyra stood with her violet eyes glowing faint silver, her breath heavy but steady. The hunters' voices thundered outside. Half-breed, come out and die with honor or we'll drag you through fire. Their words dripped with hatred, their laughter echoing like wolves circling prey. Daniel glanced at Lyra. You don't have to face this, he whispered. But she shook her head. No, I have to. If I run, they will never stop. Tonight, it ends. Her words carried a weight Daniel had not heard before. The broken bride was gone. Now she stood taller, her hidden heritage burning in her veins. The door burst open. Splinters, flying into the room. 5 hunters stormed inside, their dark armor gleaming, blades raised. Behind them, a taller figure stepped forward. The Baron himself, her husband, his eyes burning with fury. So this is where you hide, the Baron spat, his gaze swept over Daniel with disgust. A human? How low you have fallen, Lyra, sharing a bed with dirt of another world. His words cut like knives, but Lyra did not flinch. Instead, her voice rang clear. I would rather share a bed with him than a throne with you. The Baron's face, twisted with rage. Filthy heritage, I should have ended you the day you were born. He raised his blade, motioning to his hunters. Kill the human first. Make her watch. The hunters lunged forward, blades flashing. Daniel moved quickly, blocking the first strike, his knife clashing with alien steel. The impact rattled his arms, but he held firm. Lyra stepped forward, lifting her trembling hands. Silver light flickered across her skin, glowing brighter with each heartbeat. One hunter swung at her, but before the blade could land, a burst of silver energy exploded from her palm. The hunter was thrown back, crashing. Against the wall with a scream, Lyra gasped, staring at her own hands in shock. "My father's blood. It's real," she whispered. Daniel gritted his teeth, blocking another strike. "Good, then use it," he shouted. The hunters circled them, but this time the fight was different. Daniel fought with desperation, Lyra with awakening power. She raised her hands again, light surging through her veins. A wave of force knocked two hunters off their feet. Their armor cracked as they hit the floor, groaning in pain. But each use drained her knees shaking. Daniel stood beside her, his knife red with blood. Together, they formed a wall. Human strength and alien heritage, side by side. The Baron stepped forward at last, fury burning in his eyes. "Pathetic. Do you think this changes anything? You are still filth. Power or not, you will die by my hand." He raised his massive blade, charging at Lyra. Daniel threw himself in the way, their blades clashing with a deafening ring. The Baron's strength forced him to his knees, but Daniel pushed back, teeth gritted. "You're not taking her," he growled. The Baron sneered, slamming Daniel aside. The knife flew from his hand, clattering across the floor. Daniel gasped, struggling to rise. The Baron turned to Lyra, blade raised for the final strike. But Lyra did not run. She stood tall, silver light burning in her eyes. Her voice shook the walls. "You called me dirty heritage. You tried to bury me in shame. But tonight I stand as both my mother's daughter and my father's child." She raised her hands, and a surge of silver energy erupted. It struck the Baron full force, blasting him backward through the broken door. He crashed into the mud outside, his armor scorched, his roar echoing into the night. The remaining hunters froze, staring in fear at the glowing woman before them. The half-breed they had mocked now stood as something greater, something neither of their bloodlines could ever match. Daniel staggered to his feet, moving to Lyra's side. She was shaking, her strength nearly gone, but her eyes burned with determination. The Baron struggled to rise, his pride shattered. He pointed at her with a trembling hand. "This isn't over. You will always be filth. You will always—" But Lyra cut him off, her voice steady. "No, I am not filth. I am not broken. I am me, and I choose who I am now." The hunters hesitated, their loyalty shaken. Finally, one of them lowered his weapon. "The blood is not cursed," he muttered. "It is power." One by one, they stepped back, leaving. The Baron groaning in the mud, defeated, humiliated. He crawled away into the shadows, his power broken. The hunters followed, but not with the same hatred as before. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. Silence fell again around the house. Daniel leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "You did it," he whispered. Lyra looked at him, her eyes soft. "No, we did it. You fought for me when no one else would. You gave me a reason to stand." Her body trembled, exhaustion overtaking her. Daniel caught her before she could fall, carrying her gently to the bed. She looked up at him, her lips curling into a weak smile. For the first time. "I don't feel alone." Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her face, his voice low. "You never will again." As she drifted into sleep in the same bed they now shared, Daniel sat beside her, watching the firelight glow across her peaceful face. Outside, the shadows had retreated, but the memory of the night remained. She was no longer the broken bride, no longer the dirty heritage. She was Lyra, strong, alive, and free. And for the first time she belonged, not to a cruel husband, not to a cursed bloodline, but to herself, and to the human who had chosen her when no one else did.